Well, that's a commitment anyway. We'll come over and comment.
Good afternoon. I'm Kara Sonye. I'm the digital content librarian here at the Marshall Foundation. Welcome to this special event in the Marshall Legacy Series. As a graduate of the United States Space Camp and a huge science geek, I am personally delighted to welcome astronaut Pat Forrester here to speak today. 6 months after the launch of Explorer 1, President Eisenhower created the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. In 1959, he approved the transfer of all Army space-related activities to NASA. Hugh Dryden, who was the director of NASA, wrote, "It has been suggested that the new Space Flight Center be given the name the Marshall Space Flight Center in honor of General George C. Marshall. This has seemed appropriate for many reasons. The mission of NASA is the scientific research in and the exploration of space for peaceful purposes. The new center comes from NASA, from the Army, and its personnel have long been associated with the Army. It seems fitting, therefore, to honor a great military leader whose life was dedicated to the cause of peace, who initiated the Marshall Plan, who won the Nobel Peace Prize, and who served our country as Secretary of State. The bestowal of his name on the new center would not only honor his character, his leadership, and his dedication to public service, but also as a reminder to those associated with the laboratory to follow his example." Astronaut Pat Forrester has been a beneficiary of those early years of rocket science and development. A Master Army aviator with more than 4,800 hours in 50 different aircraft, Colonel Forrester began his NASA career in 1993 at Johnson Space Center as an aerospace engineer. He was selected as a mission specialist astronaut candidate in NASA in 1996. And after completing 2 years of training and evaluation, he was qualified for his flight assignment as a mission specialist. He has logged more than 950 hours in space, including 4 spacewalks. Please welcome Pat Forrester.
This really is an honor for me to be here today for lots of reasons. First of all, just walking or driving onto this campus, walking into this building, even coming into this room, it's just such a beautiful place, and it honors a very special man, and I'm very fortunate to be able to be here today. But it's also personally rewarding for me because I grew up in Virginia. My father was in the military, and we moved to the Northern Virginia area when I was probably in about 3rd grade, and I stayed there all the way until I went to the military academy at West Point. And the first opportunity I had to come back for graduate school, I did my graduate schooling at University of Virginia in Charlottesville. And no matter where I live around the world, I always feel like when I come back to Virginia that I'm coming home. And so that makes this even more special for me. And then when I began to really study General Marshall and understand what all he was involved with, so many of those areas crossed my own life, and I have I found it personally rewarding. That was my second ride to space on Atlantis in 2007. And sometimes I think, how did I get there? A kid in Virginia growing up in an Army family, Born in 1957, so I was kind of born into the space age, I think. That's the year, of course, that the Russians put up Sputnik. I couldn't imagine that almost 60 years later I'd spend so much time of my life working with cosmonauts and spending time in Russia and Kazakhstan as we launched a man with them. But today is going to talk a little about this mixture of the Army and General Marshall and space and NASA. The two things really, honestly, that have shaped my entire career and the things that I love so much. I love both of them. We do have Army Space Command. Our motto is first in space. And like I said, how did we get here? How did we end up with the U.S. Army? I'll talk to people, I'll walk around, go places, they'll find out I was in the Army and then I was an astronaut, and they'll say, Army and astronauts and Army and space, really? Well, the Army has a strong tradition of exploration, as you know, going all the way back to Lewis and Clark as they traveled across this great country discovering things that really nobody had seen before. And there's been a whole history of Army explorers that I won't go into. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the Army in space. And there's probably most of y'all here, it's a little unusual for me, know more about General Marshall, might know more about the history of Army space. This is going to be a mixture of just some of those things, a little bit of history. Hopefully there'll be some education here, but part of it's going to be entertainment and maybe some encouragement. And I see the young people in this room, and that makes me really happy to see them. Obviously, back in 1932, Wernher von Braun, as you know, most of us understand, he was just at the heart of our space program, but he originally was not part of our space program. He was hired by the German Army to develop rockets. And the first set of rockets he came up with, they called the A rockets, and eventually what was then known as an A4. It started out as an A2, but eventually the A4 was the first successful rocket that ended up being of any significance, really, as we began moving into the space age. In 1942, the first A4 rocket was successfully launched. It flew a programmed trajectory and impacted 120 miles downrange. And at that point, we knew that we needed to get busy with our own space program. This event could be considered the beginning of the space age. After that, it turned into the V2. Most of us that have any study of history, especially World War II, are familiar with the V2. If somebody speaks German, they're welcome to read that long word. But basically, that's German for vengeance weapon. And that it was as they began a series of bombings in London, Belgium, and other parts of Europe. And it was very destructive when that was going on. Hitler authorized full-scale development of V2, and by the end of 1943, it was in mass production over there in Germany. And it was used against London and Belgium and England, but also people that didn't understand about this particular rocket, different than anything that they'd seen before, is this thing was launched so far away that basically as it was coming in, it was just in this free fall at over 5,000 miles an hour, basically no sound, no warning, and here it came, and it was very, very destructive. Probably the most capable rocket that had been developed. Well, good news is the war was coming to a close. We were beginning to smell victory, and Wernher von Braun and his team knew that the end was near, and they allowed themselves to be captured by the U.S. They heard the U.S. 7th Army was moving that direction, allowed themselves to be taken. And so we now claimed him and most of his scientists and brought them into our side to begin to develop rockets. We went in and got as much of the V2 hardware as we could. We got quite a bit of it. However, we had to leave it quite a bit. The Russians were on their way. They were just really, honestly, days behind. And they ended up coming in and claiming the rest. They got probably, as far as hardware and munitions and stuff, more than we did. But we got the best part. We got the brain power. And Dr. von Braun is really kind of the father of our space program and rocketry. Then in 1946, the Army launched the first reconstructed V2 from White Sands. White Sands, of course, is a place that NASA has. We use it back when we were training for the shuttle program for all of our landings. We went out and trained in that area with the flying simulator that we had. But anyway, we launched out of White Sands for a while until all of a sudden we realized that rockets were going too far, it was becoming too dangerous, and the Army moved down to Cape Canaveral. So by mid-49, they established a new launch site on the West Florida coast, and that's what developed into Cape Canaveral. Cape Kennedy, sometimes people use those simultaneously. Kennedy Space Center is the NASA facility just to the west of Cape Canaveral, which is still an Air Force operated launch area. In 1950, the Army moved its Missile Development Group, which was the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, to Redstone Arsenal in Alabama. That began a series of very successful years of Army and space. You know that the Juno 1 launched the first satellite. Up until this time, the Department of Defense did not want us the Army and the Army people that were working in rockets to try and do anything like put satellites up. Once the Russians launched Sputnik in '57, we realized that we had a space race going on. They authorized the ballistic agency to begin to move that direction, and not too long after Sputnik 2 launched, we launched the first satellite, Explorer 1, and it was launched on an Army rocket. There's a picture of the satellite. Of course, Dr. James Van Allen, the Van Allen belts are named after him. There's Dr. Von Braun and Hickory. I think a lot of y'all probably recognize that name too. The Mercury Redstone developed out of the B-2 program. That is what we launched, the first American in space. Alan Shepard flew on an Army Redstone rocket. And then Dr. Von Braun's work, he was working on heavy lift at that time, and that ended up translating into the Saturn V. By then, we had already transferred the ballistic agency over to NASA from Redstone. They formed that particular facility there, and that's the one that they named after General Marshall, the George C. Marshall Space Flight Center. It's still there. We spent a lot of time there, a lot of engine development. For all of the things we fly, I fly to Marshall on a regular basis. I think most people know that our first spacewalker, not the first spacewalker, the Russians were in space, spacewalk before us, but our first spacewalker was Ed White. Even though he was an Air Force officer, he graduated from the military academy, but was trained through the Army. I really like this quote. At the activation ceremonies when they turned Redstone and the Ballistic Missile Agency over to NASA in 1958, this quote from Dr. Von Braun: "Without the bountiful and courageous backing and support of the Army, the free world would not have jumped off into space nearly so soon." So he really did give a lot of credit to the Army. And over the years, that seems to have been lost by so many people, that the Army was at the heart and the beginning of the space agency. So then we moved quite along, a lot of Air Force, a lot of Navy, the early test pilots, as you know, most of them coming out of Edwards Air Force Base, one civilian, formed the first group of astronauts to Mercury 7, very famous, our first class, and then we began to select groups of astronauts all the way through the Apollo program. And then in 1978, NASA selected the first group of space shuttle astronauts, and that group included several firsts for NASA. The first women astronauts were selected that year, the first African-American astronaut, the first Asian-American astronaut, and the most unusual of all, the first Army astronaut. So then Major Bob Stewart, now General retired Bob Stewart, first Army astronaut selected in 1978. That was personally important to me. I'm going to tell you my story here in a little while, but just remember Bob Stewart in 1978. So we moved down the road to where we are today. The Army is alive and well at NASA, right there in Houston, Texas. The entire astronaut corps is in Houston. That's where we're at, and we have a very specific mission. Matter of fact, we have a detachment there that is a regular Army command. I commanded it for about 5 years when I was a senior Army astronaut there. We serve as flight crew for all the nation's space programs. We provide engineering expertise, focus for NASA for Army space missions. There are still some joint DoD and NASA work going on as we look how we can dominate the battlefield, and then we support and advocate all the NASA and Army space programs. That's what our organization looks like, and for those of us who are there, I'm now retired from the Army, but when I was still active duty, I answered to 2 chain of commands. We have all of our Army personnel here, and we are in the astronaut office. We go up through what's called Flight Operations Directorate, to the head of the Johnson Space Center, to NASA, but then also we answer to our detachment commander, Army Space and Missile Defense Command, and ultimately up through the Army. So that's kind of what our chain of command looks like. That in the middle there, that picture, a lot of you all seen that. That is the Manned Maneuvering Unit, or MMU. It was developed, only flown a couple times, but Bob Stewart, our first Army astronaut, was the second person to fly that untethered in space, out on the spacewalk. That's currently the Army astronauts that we have down in Johnson Space Center. Obviously, there I am. I am the Deputy Chief of the Astronaut Office. I have moved into management. I will not fly anymore. Matter of fact, actually turned down a flight. Jeff Williams, he's class of 80 from West Point. He's currently in space. He's the commander of the space station right now. On last Thursday, so 2 days ago, he passed his 500th day in space. He's not the U.S. record holder, and not by far. Russians have multiple people that have flown over 800 days. But that's a long time, and he's currently the commander of the space station. There is a Colonel Doug Wheelock, retired. That whole top row are all retired, but still current there in Houston. Doug Wheelock, we call him the Director of Operations in Russia. Because we do fly with the Russians now, and launch with them and land with them. We've got a whole organization over in just outside of Moscow, Soviet air base, Star City, and that is where Doug, he runs that operation out there. TJ Creamer flew once, and then actually is the first astronaut to ever go through, be selected to be a flight director, go through flight director training, and now he's been both an astronaut and now he's a flight director. And then the bottom row, Tim Cooper, retired Army Colonel. He just got back from space. He and Jeff were up there at the same time. He got back from his mission. Colonel retired Shane Kimbrough is launching in September. I'll be over in Baikonur with him and with his family for his launch. Retired Colonel Mark Vandehei will launch after Shane Kimbrough there. And then that is Major Ann McLean. She's in our newest group of astronauts that we just selected in 2013. We selected 2. There's Ann. The other, who's now a Lieutenant Colonel, Drew Morgan, he's not on that picture because I have a couple other pictures of him, because I want to give you a feel for what the Army brings to NASA, just a little bit of that. Drew Morgan is a special ops MD, so medical school trained, Army, and I always like to point out, especially when I'm going and talking to groups about selection to become an astronaut, we're in the middle of the selection now, what kind of person that it takes. He's comfortable being deployed. This is obviously in Afghanistan, a little quarter. We depend on him to be out, being a representative of our armed forces, being in the field doing medical care, jumping out of airplanes without a static line as he jumps with special forces and goes back behind lines. And that's kind of the person that the Army brings to NASA. But then we got to take that, we got to get a lot of that green out of them, not all of them. We want that operational experience, and we teach them to fly our jets that we have, and we teach them to work in a spacesuit underwater, be out in field environments, doing experiments, how to do planetary exploration one day when we're on the moon and Mars, and then just survival training, things like that. But obviously, those of us in the Army that have come out of that environment actually bring a little something to that. But still. So and he's our other newest astronaut. So we had 8 astronauts selected in 2013. 2 of them were Army officers, so that's pretty amazing, 25%. And as you can see, we had Tim Coker up there that just landed. Jeff Williams, even though we're a very small portion of the office, we are very much supporting the organization. So just a summary of what our organization looks like down there. We had an Army officer in the first class of shuttle astronauts. We've had a total of 17 astronauts selected in the Army throughout the whole program. 14 of us have flown. We had 1 payload specialist selected and flown. That was back in the late shuttle days when we were moving toward having kind of passengers before the accident. And 20% of the flights have had Army officers on board NASA's flights. That's just a picture of, I told you that Tim Coker just got back. He was up there with Scott Kelly, the guy that lived up there for a year that just came back. Probably you've seen some of that in the news, Navy officer. So that's, Scott was leading, so he was turning over command of the space station to Tim Coker, who then turned it over to Jeff, who commands it right now. And so those are the 2 crews. There's Jeff and there's Tim. So quite a presence of the U.S. Army in space even now. So just a little bit about my story, how I came to end up there. Maybe it can be encouraging for some of the kids. How did someone from Virginia end up living on the space station and launching into space 3 times on the shuttle? When I grew up in Virginia, my dad had been in the Army. I knew I was going to go in the Army. He had gone to West Point. I was going to go to West Point. My great uncle had gone to West Point. And so off I went. I knew all I wanted to do was be in the infantry and be the best infantry officer I could be. Airborne Ranger. So I graduated in the infantry, airborne, in Ranger school, and I was out on a patrol. I'd been out there for about 2 days. I was hungry, I was tired. I got picked up by helicopters. It's the first time I'd ever been in a helicopter. And I still remember sitting there with the door open, my weapon between my legs hanging over, and looking up at the pilot. And I didn't know anything about flying, but I figured it must only take one, because one of those guys was eating a little box of Kentucky Fried Chicken, one of those little red and white boxes, and I was so hungry, and I said, that's what I want to do right here. So I went to flight school, became a pilot. I was the captain by this time, stationed in Hawaii. Very happy doing what I was doing, and I read an article in Army magazine about General Bob Stewart, this retired astronaut. I said, Army astronauts? I didn't know we had Army astronauts. That's what I want to do. And so I began at that point applying in 1985. NASA picked a new class about every 2 years. And after 5 applications and plenty of rejection and 11 years, I was selected into the class of 1996 and flew my first mission in 2001. You saw a video of a launch when the shuttle sits on the launch pad. It weighs about 4.5 million pounds, fully fueled. We climb in there 3 hours before launch. We're laying on our backs, our knees up in our chest, in our launch suits, and about 6 seconds before launch, the 3 main engines fired. You saw them firing, and it wasn't going anywhere. They're checking those out. Computers make sure those engines are working properly. If they're not, then it'll shut it down. If they're working properly, the 2 solid rocket motors fire. We're coming off the pad with over 7 million pounds of thrust, instantaneous. And the best way I can describe it is you're laying on your back. You can just picture you're laying on a railroad track, and all of a sudden those main engines run up and they start kind of moving around, and it's like hearing a train coming down the track. You can feel it, you know it's coming, and then when the 2 solid rocket motors fire, it's just like it's hit you, and off you go. By the time we clear the pad, you can see the top of the pad right there. We're already doing 100 miles an hour. The pad's about 80 feet tall, so we accelerate to 100 miles an hour in 80 feet, and we climb within the first 8 seconds. We roll inverted. You might have heard that call. Roll Houston, and that is so that we can protect the space shuttle, the orbiter, from the max dynamic loads as we go through the atmosphere, and that external tank bears the biggest brunt of that. And off we go. In 2 minutes, the solid rocket motors come off, and we're on just the 3 main engines. And 8 minutes after that, or 6.5 minutes after that, total about 8.5 minutes, we're in space. Engines quit. We go from 3 Gs on our chest to no Gs, and it's just an amazing experience. And this was a crew, I just like to point this out, this is a crew of my 3rd mission. Just to kind of show you the types of people that make up our space shuttle crews. Hopefully it'll be encouraging to kids. Obviously there I am, Army Colonel. This was my commander, Rich Sturko, Marine Colonel. I flew with him 3 times, with only 2 people that fly 3 missions together. This was our pilot. It was his first flight. He was the Air Force Colonel. This guy right here, it was his first flight. He grew up the kid of migrant farm workers out of Mexico. Lived in California, worked his way across, was in the fields one day and realized this is not what he was going to do the rest of his life. As a kid, went off and got education, got his PhD, became an astronaut. Danny Olivas, it was his second flight, and he was going up as a material scientist. He's got a PhD in materials. Christopher Fugelsang, you see that flag? Kids, anyone know what flag that is? What country?
Sweden.
Yeah, Sweden. He is the only ever, first and only ever Swedish astronaut. We flew with him. So when we land, we do a lot of post-flight stuff, and we got to go to Sweden for a week. And it was amazing to go to Sweden with Christopher Fugelsang. It's like being here with Neil Armstrong. He really is a hero there. He's got face recognition. Nobody would know me if I walked down the street unless I'm wearing this blue flight suit. People know him by face. I was on a train, my wife and I, and Christopher and his wife were several rows up, and he stood up, and I heard the people behind me go, "That's Christopher Fugelsang," you know. So just people, it was really a lot of fun. And then this person here, Nicole Stott, we were actually taking her up to leave her on the space station for 3 or 4 months. Mother, she had a 5-year-old at the time, and just a real, and it was her first flight. Really neat person. Just to show you the kind of people that we have in the office and what we do. Some of the training, one of the first things we do, especially for those that didn't come from the military with any flight background, we transition everyone into the front or back seat of our T-38 trainers. They're fully acrobatic, supersonic, lots of fun to fly. I was out flying on Thursday night. Pretty amazing. They were built in the 50s, right? We were flying the first production aircraft for quite a while down there, a 59 tail number. The guy that designed those, very forward thinking. They still look good. NASA takes great care of them. Inside, you know, they have autopilot, fully glass cockpit. Everything's really nice inside, but everything else on the outside is the same. My specialty was spacewalking. I was a mission specialist, and so that's what I did on all my missions. One of the ways we get trained is we get inside this suit right here. It weighs about 300 and something pounds, 325 pounds, I think, on Earth. And so you can see it would be hard to move around in it. This is a real suit and decommissioned to be used in this giant swimming pool that we have right here. It's 100 feet by 200 feet by 40 feet deep, perfectly clear. We have a mock-up of the space station underwater. We get in this suit. I told you how heavy they were. They suit us up, put the helmets on it, pressurize us. We're getting oxygen through those umbilicals right there. And they lower us down in the water, and we train underwater. And if training goes well, you get selected for a spacewalk. That's me out on my second mission. I'm actually doing some electrical connections and stuff as we built the space station. This is the space shuttle window. Someone just looking out the window taking a picture. You kind of have that sensation that you might fall when you're on a spacewalk and you go outside in your spacesuit. You have this feeling that you are just falling off a building. And the reason is because you are. As we go around the Earth in this space station, space shuttle, anything that we're flying in, you know, there's no engines making it go. We're just in a free fall around the Earth. But you have that sensation that you're just floating because that your environment's falling with you. But when you go outside in your suit, you know, as long as you hold on, that goes away. There's a neuromuscular thing that says I'm not falling. Or if it's dark, you don't feel like you're falling. But when it's light, if you let go and look at, you just have that sensation that you're falling. It takes us 90 minutes to go around the Earth. So about half that time it's dark, half the time it's light. And what we do is just kind of keep track of sunrises and sunsets. Okay, I've been around the Earth once, that's an hour and a half. Because our spacewalks are typically 6.5, 7 hours, sometimes a little longer. We're out there. So you just kind of remember how many sunrises and sunsets you've had as you go around the Earth and you're doing your stuff. Like I said, half the time it's dark, and when it's dark, it's really dark. We have lights on our helmets so that we can see what we're working on, but space behind us is just really pitch black. Sometimes you're not the person that gets to be outside, sometimes you're the person inside. I did that for 5 spacewalks. And what you're doing is you're keeping track of all the procedures, talking to the crew members on the microphone that's just floating right there, and kind of just keeping track of the spacewalk. You choreograph the whole thing, make sure they're doing what they need to do, because it's a long time. That's a picture I took on my first mission, on my first spacewalk when I was outside, just to give you a feel for your view of the Earth. There's Space Shuttle Discovery. This is actually my arm right here. That's a checklist we use, so we have procedures on our arm, and we carry cameras out and such. Just a picture I took looking back at it. Now, if you were on a spacewalk, if you went out, it would look something like this. We also have video cameras on our helmets. We always go out with a partner. We never go out by ourselves. And we call it walking, although really we do it all with our hands. The station and the shuttle have got these handrails all over it, and that's how we use to move around. You can see the nose of the shuttle down there below me. We also carry tools with us. They're certified for space, but they're not unlike what you might use in a garage. That's a power driver, but we did lots of bolts, lots of connections and everything. And again, we always go out with a partner, check on each other every now and then, and make sure that we're doing okay. So that's what it's like when we're out on spacewalk. What did we build? We built the International Space Station. There's still a lot of people in the U.S. and places I go that don't realize that we have built a space station, and that since about 2010, we've had continuous human presence in space on that space station. Obviously not the same person, but we have never not had a U.S. astronaut aboard the space station. This is a real picture with this space shuttle dock to it. It's about 361 feet across right there. It's about 250 feet that direction. This is just a truss structure, solar arrays for energy, radiators to dissipate heat. Anything that looks like a tin can, that's what we live in. That's the habitable portion. And most of this was built by the Russians. And then starting about here, this is all the U.S. The Japanese built this. The Europeans built this. And right here is the little thing that we go out when we're on spacewalks. And just to give you a feel for the size, it's as big as a football field, plus the end zone. And sometimes people don't quite understand when I say that we build it one piece at a time, carrying the pieces up in the shuttle. So we would load a piece like this, and we use these robotic arms to pull it out, hand it off to the space station, just like that. And then the robotic arm on the space station would inch its way down to the end, take that piece, on the end. Then we go out in our spacesuits and we put it together. Electrical connections, fluid connections, bolts. It's like building a building. It's construction in space. High altitude construction worker is what I did most of the time. Real quick, this is a good friend of mine, Sunny Williams. I was on orbit with her on the station. One day we were up there. It was late, getting near the Army-Navy thing, and they wanted us to do a little thing for the Army-Navy. So we were talking, and we both agreed, hey, we'll run off to our things. We'll get on something for the little TV spot we were going to do, and come back and meet in the laboratory. I go off, I get my button. I come back. She looks like a billboard for the Naval Academy. She's got her shirt on. She's put a pennant up there behind us. And it's like, Sonny, what are you doing? You're killing me. But I really just showed you her picture because I wanted to introduce you to her. She's just an amazing woman, Indian descent. And she's going to give you a little quick tour of the space station. Just 5 minutes.
Hello, I'm Sunny Williams. I'm up here on the International Space Station. Now, want to say where we are. So right now, we're in the Japanese laboratory. It's one laboratory out of many here on the International Space Station. It's actually on the left-hand side. If I was the International Space Station and I was flying through space like this, my left hand would be where the Japanese laboratory is. Now again, we're on the right-hand side, all the way on the right of the International Space Station. This is Columbus, the European module. It has science experiments all over. You can see it looks a little bit crowded. And here we do a lot of our medical experiments. So this is Node 2. This is a really cool module. Of course, most of these modules you'll see they have 4 sides, and they're put together. That way we can sort of work on a flat plane, either a wall, a floor, another wall, or the ceiling. But you know, again, all you have to do is turn yourself and your reference changes. The reason I'm bringing that up is because this is where 4 out of 6 of us sleep. And so people always ask about sleeping in space. Do you lie down? Are you in a bed? Not really, because it doesn't matter. You don't really have the sensation of lying down. You just sit in your sleeping bag. So here's one sleep station right here. I'm going in right now. You can follow me if you want. So I'm inside. It's sort of like a little phone booth, but it's pretty comfy. I've got a sleeping bag right here that we sleep in, so we don't have sort of like a little bit of a cover. We don't fly all over the place. But you know, you can sleep in any orientation. I have it feeling like I'm standing up right now, but like you saw, I'm on the floor. But it doesn't matter if I turn over and I sleep upside down. I can't have it, I don't have any sensation in my head that tells me that I'm upside down, so it really doesn't matter. The sleep station is also like a little office. We've got a computer in here. As you can see, we've got a couple little toys. I've got some books. I've got some clothes and other things that make it sort of like home. I'm coming out. And just for reference, that's one sleep station. This one's another. Right here. There's one on the ceiling, if you want to call it. Right here. And then there's a fourth on the other wall over here. So all of us sleep in a little bit of a circle. All right, come on back. There's more to show you. In the U.S. laboratory. Again, this is a laboratory with science experience on all of the walls here, all sorts of stuff that we do. And one of the things we also do is we exercise. We have some exercise equipment on board the space station. We need to do that because we lose bone density and muscle mass while we're up here, and that's a result of not having to fight against gravity. So, how we keep ourselves in shape are with a bike, a treadmill, and a weightlifting machine. This is the bike. You notice the clipped pedals. So all you need to do is actually clip your feet in, and then you can start pedaling. You don't need a seat because you don't sit down. Actually, I haven't sat down for 6 months now, so you don't need any type of seat. Just make sure you're held in with your pedals. You probably see that the bike bounces around a little bit. As I move it, it's not steady and held to the wall firmly. And the reason for that is the space station is pretty big. You saw that there's also solar arrays on the space station. If we start putting any forces into the space station, it's going to make those solar arrays bounce around a little bit. So to prevent that, the machines bounce around a little bit, move around a little bit. And that way we don't put any forces onto the structure of the spacecraft out to the solar arrays. All right, a little farther on. Come on.
We don't sit, but watch how she holds herself in position and stops herself each time. With our feet, we come in, we lock our feet under and hold ourselves in position.
Here's a a pretty cool place. This is sort of like in your house where everybody meets in the morning. After you wash your face, brush your teeth, you want to find something for breakfast. And this is our kitchen. You might notice there's all sorts of foods here. It's like opening the refrigerator. You got all your different stuff that you want to have: drinks, meats, eggs, vegetables, cereals, bread, snacks, and that's a good place. That's where you find all the candy. Side dishes, and then some little power bars just in case. So we have with water. Some of it is already made, and then all we have to do is heat it up. So something like this, I'm pulling out barbecued beef brisket. Pretty yummy. Not only is this food made in the U.S., but we also have food here from Japan. We've got Russian food. As you can see, all these red containers are filled with food that's from Russia. And then we get some of our specialty stuff, some things that we like, some of our favorite stuff that your family can send up. In fact, I like fluffernutters, and so I got sent up some food.
That's probably enough of that. You probably noticed her hair. The women say that every day in space is a bad hair day. But I'm going to skip through a little bit of stuff just because she gave you a tour of the station. And one of the things about being up there is we love to look out the window. You know, we spend our entire life pursuing space, trying to get to become an astronaut and to get into space. And the first thing we want to do is look back at Earth. You know, it's just really amazing. Earth's a beautiful planet. Every 45 minutes, again, we see a sunrise or a sunset, and they're all stunning, and they happen very quickly at 17,500 miles an hour. That's the speed, 25 times the speed of sound. We're flying around the Earth as we orbit it. We see a lot of different weather patterns. Obviously, here's a hurricane, but I also like this picture because you see that thin blue line? You know what that thin blue line is? Anyone know? It's the atmosphere. And when you're up there and you see how thin the atmosphere, that's the only thing that protects life on Earth for us, you realize why we need to take care of it. Because space is big and that atmosphere is very thin. This was on my first mission. This is a volcano in Italy. It erupted recently, as a matter of fact, but this is back in 2001. It's about it, and then we happened to come over as it was erupting. This is obviously the area, northern part of Africa, Egypt. The Nile River and the delta into the Mediterranean. If you look up the coast, this would be Israel right here. There's the Dead Sea, Syria, Jordan, that area that's in so much turmoil right now. But sometimes you go over and it's at night. And so there's the same area at night, and you can see how we as humans settle, especially in areas like that, those arid regions, we settle around water. So you can look up there. There's probably the lights of Haifa and Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, that area there. You can also get a little view of the northern lights at night as you look up toward the north. We can look at cities. We carry really great cameras, and then we have a 400 millimeter lens. We have a doubler, so we can get to like 800 magnification. Anyone recognize what city that is? Yeah, so there's Manhattan. That's Central Park. It's really easy to pick out natural versus man-made when you're up there. So there's Central Park, Statue of Liberty area right there. Okay. How about that one?
D.C.
Yeah, Washington, D.C. Coming up to the Potomac. Here is the Capitol. You come all the way down the mall. Go up this way to the Obama's house. And then this way all the way to the Jefferson Memorial. There's the Lincoln Memorial, the Jefferson Memorial there at the pond. That's something that I used to go to as a kid all the time. It's really easy to pick out from space, just the way it reflects the light and everything. That's RFK Stadium. Obviously we have a new stadium built down here, but that's the old RFK Stadium. There's one for you. You may not know, but I'm going to tell you that this is the north, and that might help you. This is the James River.
Richmond.
Yeah, this is Richmond. So there's the raceway up there. So this is north up there. We're getting closer to home. All right. Here we are. What is this town? You come, here's the river. Natural Bridge is right in that area. I knew what that was, and I can't for the life of me think what it is. Yeah. Yeah. It's exactly what it is. And I can't remember what that one is either, but there's Lexington right there. So it looks like from space. You see, if you catch it at the right time, rivers really reflect light. And sometimes they don't, and they're hard to pick out. That's not too far from here. That's wintergreen. Anyway, we don't fly the shuttle anymore. We get to space to and from with the Russians on a Soyuz Progress. Again, we do most of our training outside of Moscow and Star City, a little secret Soviet base, and then we fly down to Kazakhstan and launch out of Baikonur. Obviously, that's not ideal for the Russians anymore because Kazakhstan is its own country, but it used to be obviously part of the USSR when they started. We launch off the very same pad that Yuri Gagarin, the first human to ever launch in the space, launches. I only have 2 launch pads. They call that Yuri's pad, sometimes Yuri launch. But that's how we get there. That's still our destination. Again, that's what the Russian Soyuz looks like. We are in the process of using commercial crew now. There's the Dragon. This is how we get cargo up also. It's called an HTV. Soon we're going to be flying commercial crew on Dragon and Boeing CST-100. And then that's going to be our very own Orion that'll launch in 2018. First time we put a crew on it in 2021. And that's it for questions. Depending on what the questions are, how long they go and how long they give me, I've got one other little thing I can show you, but I'd really like to hear what you might be interested in. Before I forget to sum it up, General Marshall could not have imagined what was coming in the future, right? I always tell people I graduated from West Point in 1979. Anyone know when the first space shuttle launched? 81. So when I go talk to college kids that know they have it all figured out, they know exactly what they want to do. I knew what I wanted to do, Airborne Ranger, you know. We didn't even have a space shuttle. How would I know outside of college that I would become a space shuttle astronaut, fly on it 3 times? Didn't even exist. There's no telling what's going to be out there. He could not have imagined, envisioned what was coming, but it was his vision. And the way that the Army space program developed and then eventually became the Marshall Space Flight Center for NASA in 1958, that we have what we have today. And it's just really an amazing man. I'm so proud to be part of this series. So questions? Yes, sir.
What is the status of NASA now, and who funds it as far as...
Okay, so when you say the status of NASA, we're still a government agency. We're part of the executive branch, which a lot of people don't realize. And that may not mean anything to some of the young kids in the audience, but that means that we serve basically under the president. The administrator and the deputy administrator of NASA are political appointees. Okay, they don't necessarily have to have any science background, anything. That also means that every time a new president is selected, we probably end up with a new administrator. That happens a lot. We also know, going all the way back to Kennedy and his vision of going to the moon, we'll put a man on the moon and bring him safely back to Earth before the end of the decade, because it's easy, but because it's hard. And everyone, a lot of presidents, I believe, try and have some vision towards space. But if it changes, and the presidency is 4 years, and it takes 8 to 10 years to put a rocket together and fly it, you can see those two don't work very well. What is our budget? It is funded by our taxpayers, and it is less than 1/2 of 1 penny of every tax dollar. All right? So less than 1/2 cent goes to NASA, and that's all of NASA. That's not the human spaceflight program, but the robotic, interplanetary probes, aeronautics, all of it. Less than 1/2 of 1 cent. I don't know what the defense budget is. I don't know what social welfare is. Those are probably all up at 25, 30%. But anyway, It's a very small budget. We do a lot with it, but that's also keeps us from being able to have the kind of momentum that we would like to have. But NASA's in great shape. I believe it'll continue to be in good shape where we continue to explore and pursue, and it's all, honestly, it's just based on budget and how much we can do each year. Yes, sir.
Thanks for your presentation, but then that's a nice intro to my thoughts. 20, 30 years from now, many of us are, I'm a little older than you are, but the phenomenon that was going to the moon, and I remember in elementary school being moved down up in Northern Virginia, being moved down to the auditorium to see the Mercury astronauts launch and Gemini and Apollo and all of that. And that was my freshman year at VMI when we landed on the moon, or in July. And I mean, the world was spellbound, but certainly America was, and it was the idea of putting a human up there.
Right.
As we get more and more of, the Mars exploratory missions, everything are fascinating, but not, I would say, worldwide or even nationwide. Is it budgetary? You mentioned a political appointee, and my question is kind of, how do we get people interested so that they will fund dramatic gestures? The nation was committed to going to the moon, and it was because we had a person up there. A robot going to another planet doesn't have the same romance, if you will. Where are we going to be in 20 years?
Well, we would like to say that we'll be on Mars in 20 years, but I think that would be tough. I really do think that it would be hard. Right now, we don't have plans of going back to the moon. The reason Mars is more appealing is because it's a planet. It has an atmosphere. It has a gravity. It's more like Earth. Of course, we've been to the moon. I was in Moscow last week. The Russians are planning to go to the moon. Part of it is, I don't know. We had a goal that wasn't just political. It was driven by the space race. It was driven by some other things, and the funding was there. I don't know what it would take to do that. And some days when I work, I think it shouldn't matter. We should do it because it's right. It's exploration. We shouldn't have to have the public behind us. We're happy to work in complete isolation from having public attention. However, you're right. If that drives the budget. But really, I can't convince myself it drives the budget, because interest is short-lived and the budget cycle is a lot longer than that. Going to Mars, which NASA would tell you we're going to do in 2030, I think that's one of the things I'm going to touch on that. Let me just see, there was another hand. Yeah?
Is there a danger of these private companies kind of recruiting astronauts? I'm thinking of like Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, they have. And we're happy with that. I made a decision. I don't want to fly in space anymore. I'm happy being the deputy chief, but some people want to move on and do something differently, and we would like to have people with space experience working for other companies rather than that. But yes, without a doubt, most of the companies have former astronauts working for them.
What's NASA's relation with JPL?
Well, yes, JPL is part of NASA, and they handle our, obviously, the robotic type missions, the robotic landers, and that type of thing.
When you were talking about commercial flights, was that like Elon Musk, SpaceX?
Yeah, SpaceX. What happens is, you have a car, you want a new car. Not everyone can keep their old car and buy a new car. You have a house, you want a new house. Not everyone can keep their old house and buy a new house. We have a space shuttle. The space shuttle can't go to the moon or Mars. It's a winged vehicle. It's only good for low Earth orbit. So we want to build a new rocket that can take us to the moon and to Mars and beyond. That is Orion and the Space Launch System, SLS. But we can't build that with the billions that it costs and fly the space shuttle. So we said, we need to get out of the space shuttle business, but we still need to live and work on our space station. It was completed in about 2010-ish or so, and we want to continue to fly until 2024. So we have asked commercial companies to come up with a capsule that can launch and get them and dock with the space station and get our crews back and forth. And that's what Boeing with CST-100, Cruise Space Transportation 100, and Dragon with SpaceX are doing. Right now, already SpaceX and Orbital out of Wallops, Virginia, are already taking supplies up. But you may hear every now and then one of them, something happens. Orbital lost the vehicle, so we lost 6,000 pounds of supplies, food, equipment. Dragon lost one, SpaceX lost one, and the Russians lost one too. We lost 3 within a little over a year, and it really hurt us a lot to not have the supplies up there. But we can't risk losing a crew. So launching equipment has a certain rigor to it. Launching humans has more. And so right now, even though they're continuing to fly supplies, they just flew some up last week. They're not quite ready to launch humans, but that's what they're being contracted to do. Because honestly, we want to, at some point, quit paying the Russians to launch us. We pay $72 million a seat to the Russians to launch a person to space. That's what it costs.
How was the communication with an international crew handled? Is it in English?
The official language is English. However, we all are required to become fluent in Russian. They are required to become fluent in English. I think we do a better job of it, personally, doing our side. And then we can speak in Russian, but mostly it's English. But communications are good. And by the way, we have cosmonauts living with us in Houston all the time. Love them, love their families. We spend so much time in Russia. On the operator level, we've got a great relationship, no matter what's going on politically at the highest levels. The cosmonauts are great. They're professional. They know space. Russia knows space. They've been building space stations a long time, long before we were. They beat us in space in most things. They're a good group to work with. Okay, I'm going to do this in 5 minutes, so don't worry. We have this thing called low Earth orbit. That's where we're at right now. The space station is about 250 miles up. Okay. And Carrie, you just give me the hook when you got to give me the hook. All right. But I'll do this quick, I promise. Then we've been to the moon, and then Mars. But people use this low Earth orbit, moon and Mars, kind of like y'all might go, hey, do we want to go to Lynchburg or DC or New York? Like, it's just this one, or maybe a little farther, or maybe a little farther. And it's not that way at all. So low Earth orbit, we're good at. There's our favorite place to go in low Earth orbit. Just to give you a feel, the Earth is 8,000 miles across, right? And that space station is operating over there at 250 miles up. That's low Earth orbit. The moon, and we can get there in 8.5 minutes. The moon, remember, it took us 3 days. We know what that's like. We've done it. If Earth is 8,000 miles across and we back away, back away, back away, there's the moon out there at 240,000 miles. So roughly 1,000 times farther than our space station is from Earth. But that's still doable. That's 3 days. So then you just think, okay, Mars is a little bit farther. We just throw a little more propellant on there and let's go. So if that's 240,000 miles, so there's your Earth and your moon. I'm going to back away, back away, back away. Wow, it's getting a little hard to see. So let me draw a line where the moon is. So there's the moon's orbit around the Earth. That's 500,000 miles. We're going to back away, back away, back away, back away, back away. We're almost losing the whole orbit. That's 500,000 mile little circle there. Back away, back away. Anyone have any idea what that is? No, that's not Mars. We wish it was Mars. That's Venus. Let's back away. So now that blue line, that's the whole Earth and the moon around it, right? That's our orbit around the sun. And then there's Venus. How about this one right here? Anyone know what this one is? Mercury. Mercury, right? Let's back away, and there's the sun. So there's Mercury, Venus, there's the Earth's orbit around the sun. Remember just that little blue line's like 500,000 miles wide. Let's back away, back away, back away. And there, if you can barely see that red line, that is the orbit of Mars. All right, the orbit of Mars around the sun. How long does it take us to go around the sun? 1 year. 1 year, 365 days. All right? I'm going to get rid of some stuff. So now all we care about is Mars and Earth around the sun. It takes us 12 months, 365 days to go around. It takes the sun, Mars, 22 and a half months to go around. We're 93 million miles away from the sun. Mars is 140 million miles away from the sun. All right? So, you would think that we could just wait till the Mars is as close as it could be to the Earth and we could launch. The way it works is we do a transfer orbit. We launch and we put ourselves in an elliptical orbit that crosses our orbit of the sun and Mars's orbit of the sun. Okay? And that's 17 months to do that orbit. All right, so here we go. We're going to launch. We're going to wait till the Mars is as close to the Earth as it can be. The Earth is the blue, Mars is the red. That's our little spacecraft. The star is the sun in the middle. Here we go, launch. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 8.5 months. We arrived at Mars orbit. And guess what? Mars isn't there. We're embarrassed. Okay, that didn't work. Keep going. We're headed back to Earth. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Whoops, let me go back. 17. We're back in Earth's orbit. And Earth is 160 million miles away. Okay? So now we're dead. We'll just keep circling that transfer orbit until we run out of supplies. So that didn't work. Let's get smarter. This time, let's wait until Mars is about 40 degrees off, and we're going to launch. We're smarter this time. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8.5. Now we're heroes. We got there. 8.5 months in that capsule, and we're at Mars. We land, we plant the flag, we salute, and we head home. And at the end of 17 months, we're back in Earth's orbit. Because Earth's not there. All right, so that didn't work. Let's get smart. We've got it down to we know when to launch. So here we go. We get our 8.5 months. We get over to the orbit of Mars. We made it. This time we're going to stay on Mars until it's lined up and ready to go. So at month 22, 23 and a half months, we're going to launch. And we're going to fly. And we're going to come back safely home. So why is going to Mars hard? It is a 32-month mission right now. Not a 3-day mission, not an 8.5-minute mission, but a 32-month mission. It's almost 3 years to get there. And you have to take everything with you. You have to live on the planet until 23 and a half months. And then you have to have what you need to launch off the planet to get back. Mars is hard. Understanding why Mars is hard is hard. I mean, it is not just a little farther, throw a little more propellant on board, and that is why we've got a ways to go. We don't have a way to keep the human body healthy. If you could see us pull people out of the capsule after 6 months on the space station on Earth, where we have an entire support structure for them, doctors and medical care and rehab specialists and everything, for 45 days to get them to where they're back feeling normal again after 6 months. There's nobody waiting on Mars for them when they get there. I mean, it's going to be tough, you know. It's going to be really tough. All right, I went over, but I love to make sure people understand this Mars is not just like a farther place to go. So, all right, thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it. It was an honor. Thank you so much. I'll treasure this.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. I'd like to invite you guys to see our exhibition. It's called From Machine to Man. It's in the lower gallery right outside. And afterwards, you can join us upstairs for a reception where Pat will be available to talk to you and sign autographs and maybe selfies. So thank you again, guys. Thank you for coming.